All right, so in this video, we're going to take our sign, we're going to break it into pieces, flatten it all out to get ready to be lasered, and then take it over to Inkscape and do one or two small more things to it. I don't know what I just said, but let's get started. So the first thing I want to do is create a copy of this before I can do anything with it. So I'm just going to highlight everything that I've made so far. I'm going to do the M for move command. And next thing I'm going to do is say create a copy. And then I'm going to drag that copy backwards, just, some distance away. And I'm going to click OK. Now I've got one here that I can flatten, but I need to clean up a few things. So we're over in the bodies folder. I'm going to click a new group. I'm going to double click on that new group, or just single click, and call it assembled. And that's where I'm going to put the things that I made first. And I know they are, this is the ones they are because the other ones have ones by them. Those are the ones we just copied. Throw the assembled one in there. And I'm going to right click on bodies, create a new group, and I'm going to call that group flattened. And I'm going to take the other ones and I'm going to drop them in there. What this allows me to do is hide and unhide all of the group in one click instead of having to click 5 different times each time I want to hide and unhide. All right, so now I've hidden the assembled ones because I don't care about them anymore. They're going to just sit there in the background. And I've recentered my drawing on the flattened ones. So now I need to actually flatten them. So I'm going to do that by using the move command. And I'm going to flatten the two outside pieces first. So I'm going to click on the outside piece here, and I'm going to rotate it. For this project, I actually want the outside faces of everything. I want them facing away from me, not towards me. Normally I would do them towards me, but this time I'm actually going to engrave on the back side of this face, not the front side of the face. So I'm going to just spin this around so the front side is facing away from me, 90 degrees, just like that. Click to the front view, and now I can grab this center dot and position this thing off to the side, just enough to get it away from everything else. And I'm going to click OK. Now I'm going to click over to the side here, or tip to the side. I'm going to do a move command on this one. And again, I want the front to, or the outside to be facing away from me, so I'm going to turn it in this direction, 90 degrees. Just like that. Go to the front view, grab the center circle, and just kind of position it somewhere conveniently out to the side. Click OK. Now for these next ones, the faces, they're tipped at an angle. So I need to first flatten them before I do anything else. So I'm going to do the align tool first. So what I'm going to do is click over here and say align tool right here. And I'm going to say I want to align this with this face. And I'm going to click OK. And when I do that, look what's happened. See how this one is still tipped, but this one is now flat? That's what I just accomplished. I'm going to do the exact same thing for the other face. I'm going to click here somewhere that's not one of the dots, and I'm going to align it to this face as well, and then I'm going to click OK. Now, right now, they're overlapping each other, which is super weird, but it'll work. And now I'm just going to do a move tool and move these two out of the way. So I'm going to come here, and I'm going to do a move tool right here. And again, there we go. And again, I want the outside facing away from me. So I'm going to actually rotate this one 180 degrees all the way around like that. Now it's facing away from me. And I'm going to go back to the front, and I'm going to center it like, I don't know, like up here somewhere. Perfect. Just like that. And click OK. Next thing I'm going to do is the same thing with this one. I want to flip it around, and then position it. So I'm going to do the move command here, and I'm going to click like there-ish. Tip it over a little bit so I can see what's going on. 180 degree flip. Now, this really isn't necessary for this shape because it's the same left and right, so you really can't tell. But just to stay consistent, I'm going to flip them all. Click OK. Now the outward facing part of this brace is the top of the brace, which you'll see more. So I want the top of the brace facing away from me. So I'm going to do a move command here. I'm going to click on this and I'm going to tip it down this way so the face is now facing away from me at 90 degrees. And then I'm going to go to the front view and just position it down below here. And I want to make sure I get this edge below these two side pieces because it's going to be really easy to measure the distance from the bottom edge to the top edge, and we need that distance for the next step. Okay. All right. Everything's almost ready to be sent over to create our drawing for the laser cutter, except for the fact that right now there's some of them farther forward than others. We need to get them all flat to the same level, just like they would be on a piece of plywood. So I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to choose one to be the flat piece for everything. And I'm going to actually choose this top piece. I'm going to use the align tool and I'm going to align this one with that one. And I'm going to click enter. Align tool. Now I'm going to align this one with that one. Enter. Align bottom one with this one. Enter. Align side one with this one. Enter. Everyone's happy. Let's take a look. So now you can see from the right side, and I can flip it this way, just look all around it. There's no pieces that aren't perfectly aligned with each other's face. Awesome. So at this point, we're ready to create our drawings that's going to actually create the outlines that the laser is going to follow. So let's do that. To do that, I'm going to create what's called a construction plane. I like to do these drawings by creating a construction plane just inside the piece of plywood, and then I have Fusion trace the edge where the plane goes through the wood. Let me show you what I mean by that. So I click on the face of any of them, but this one is the one I'm going to use. I'm going to drop it into the plywood. Right now that plane is right on the face of the plywood. I'm going to say -0.1. That's going to bring me into the plywood by 0.1. Hit enter. Let me show you what that just did. Now I've got a construction plane, this yellow line right here, that's inside this piece of plywood, just a little bit on the inside. So now what I can do is I can create a sketch on that plane, and my sketch will actually be in the piece of plywood. So sketch here, click there, and you can see if I click on this right side again, that black line represents my sketch plane. Tip it just a tiny bit, you can see that that sketch plane is inside the piece of plywood. All right, so I'm going to go back around to the front view. Whoops. And I'm going to do what's called an Intercept tool. And what this does is it draws a line wherever the object passes through the sketch plane, it draws a line where it passes through. So I'm going to come over here first and say my selection filter should be set to bodies because I want to draw the body, not just part of the body, that's the entity. And then I'm going to come over here and notice that when I go over an object, it turns red. That tells me that that object passes through the plane, and then the red shows me the shape it's going to draw for me. So if I click on this, I get that shape. And this one's red as well, so I need that one, and that one, and that one, and that one. And then I'm going to click OK. And it just drew all the outlines for me. What I'm going to do is turn off the flattened bodies so I can make sure I've got everything. And sure enough, there it is. Everything I need to draw is on there. Now, before I do anything with this sketch, I need to measure from the top, the highest point at the top to the lowest point at the bottom. And that's why I kept these two flat pieces at the very top and the very bottom to make this part easier. So I'm going to click here and click here, and that is 16.505. I need to write that number down. I'm going to need it in just a second. And I want to make sure I get that number down perfectly, 16.505. We're going to use that number to scale our drawing when we get into Inkscape. It's going to come in at some wild, wrong size, and we're going to have to scale it down to the right size. We're going to need that number. Okay, I'm going to hit close here. And now I'm going to come over to my sketches folder. I'm going to come down here to sketch 7, and I'm going to call sketch 7 layer 1, and I'm going to put that number in there. So 16, instead of using a decimal point, I'm going to use a comma, And that's only because later on I'll be using this number as part of a file name. And when you use decimals or periods as part of a file name, it can screw everything up. Because it thinks, the computer sometimes thinks whatever's after the decimal or the period is the file type. So I use commas instead of periods. Okay, so that layer is done. My drawings are done. And this project, actually, finished sketch, only has one layer. And that's because, I'm going to hide the sketch real quick. That's because we made this face as two separate layers. Instead of having a single too thick body, we had two separate bodies. If we had made it as as one body with two thicknesses, like twice as thick, we'd have to create another sketch behind this one, but we didn't do it that way. And that's what I was saving us work when I was doing that earlier. All right, last thing we need to do, we need to convert this layer drawing into a Dxf file, which is what Inkscape can read. So I'm going to right click on layer 1 and I'm going to say save as Dxf. Fusion is going to ask me where I want to save it, and I have it under Fusion 360, Signs, Computer Signs, Dxf files. That's how I like to organize things. And then Final, Layer 1, 16,505. And this is where I want to avoid using periods for sure, because it's going to think it's a period, it's going to mess stuff up. So there's my name of mine, name yours what you'd like to name yours, and click save. All right, so now Fusion is done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the assembled one. I'm going to turn off the flattened version, and I'm going to just tip it at a perspective. I like to leave Fusion like this, because what it does is it uses whatever your last view was to create a little icon for what the project was. This way I can see exactly what it is right away. So I'm going to hit Control S and say OK. Once that's done, I'm just going to close out Fusion and open up what's called Inkscape. This is Inkscape. So when I get to Inkscape, I need to do a little bit of setting up. So I'm going to go to Document Properties. I'm going to click down here to Width. Now the sort of piece of paper that's on the screen right here shows you how big of a space you have to work with. This you want to be the size of the piece of plywood you're using. So if you're using, for this project, we'll be using a smaller piece of plywood. The size of the whole cutting bed, I don't have one handy. The size of the whole cutting bed is 60 centimeters wide by 30 centimeters tall. The plywood we're going to be using is 45 wide. So I'm going to make this 45. Whoops, change it to centimeters first. 45 wide, tab, 21 high, enter. And I'm going to come over here. Now what it's done is it changed that. This is the size of the piece of plywood. So when I put my parts on there, I know I can't exceed that edges. I got to stay inside that space when I'm assembling all my parts together. And the last thing I like to do is come over here to snap and turn these snaps down to something fairly low. What snap is that when two objects get close together, their corners will suddenly snap together to line things up easier. It's super nice when you're lining things up, but if you have it to a big number, even when you get even kind of close, it suddenly snaps, and it makes positioning things close together really hard to do. So I break those down to those two. And then just close this. It will automatically, once you change something, it automatically does that thing. You don't have to click OK or anything. Next thing I want to do is bring in my Dxf drawing. So I'm going to go over here to File, and I'm going to click Import. I'm going to go find my Dxf file. And for me, it's Final Layer 1, 16,505. And I'm going to click Open. It's going to ask me some questions. It wants me to do a manual scale. And I'm going to check here for Read from File. This doesn't work. It should work. Hopefully it will work in the future sometime. But try it out. There should be coded in the file how big to make it. I haven't seen it work yet. And I'm going to click OK. And then for these, let's see, I don't know which one of these to use. Let's use the top one and just say okay. In fact, you can click don't ask me again even. I'm going to say okay. Awesome. And there's my part. And you can see now, let me change this up here to centimeters. So change yours to centimeters. It brought it as 41 centimeters tall. Like, that's not right. It's supposed to be 16.505. And that's why we measured that number. What we need to do is change this to the correct measurement, which is 16.505. Now, before I do that, I need to hit this lock button. What this lock button does, it says, if you shrink the height, the Inkscape will shrink the width the same amount, shrunk the height. If you leave it unlocked, it will just shrink the height and you just have this stretched, weird looking thing. So here I'm going to do 16.505. And now I want to use the decimal point for sure. I don't want to use a comma here. And then I'm going to go enter, and that's the actual size of my parts. Awesome. Now we need to do some coloring. So our laser cuts, through cuts were red, and then engraving is black. So we're going to need to change this to red. To do that, we're going to come up here to Object and open up Fill and Stroke. That'll open up this panel over here. Now, fill is the color on the inside. So you can see if I turn that to fill, all of that is on the inside color. And we don't want any fill, so I'm going to turn the fill off. And stroke is the line that goes around the outside edge. So any object can have a fill or it can have a stroke. Or it can have both. Or neither, but then it's invisible. So I'm going to turn this up to red because these are all supposed to be the cut lines. You can see they turn to red on the screen right away. And then the stroke style, I'm going to turn this to 0.4. That's just optional, but it makes it a little easier to see the lines. I'm going to drag them over here to this, onto the bed. Actually, I'm going to keep them off the plywood for now. Now, I could just drag, this actually fits. I could just drag it here and say good enough. But notice how I'm going to waste a bunch of plywood here and down here. So I want to be a little more thoughtful on this. So what I'm going to do is come over here and I'm going to ungroup these. They're all grouped as one thing right now. To do that, I'm going to do Control-Shift-G. And I'm going to keep doing that until down here at the bottom, it's going to say no groups to ungrouped selection. So Control-Shift-G. And then you'll just get these released like that. Now here's the only problem with doing this. If I grab this side piece and drag it out, notice it's not connected to the little pieces on the inside. So I'm going to Control-Z, I'm going to undo that move. I'm going to use my mouse, so I'm going to click and drag a box around all those things. And I'm going to do Control-G for group. So Control-G groups, Control-Shift-G ungroups. All right, do the same thing for this side. This one needs it. Control-G for group. And then one last thing, this one right here in the middle is going to need to be grouped as well. And I'm going to say Control-G for grouping that one. Now I can move them around independent of each other. So I'm going to move that one there. I don't know, maybe that one right there. Maybe this one, yeah, that'll fit there. I'm actually going to move this up here. Notice how I'm staying away from the edge by a little bit. I don't want to get too close to the edge because the plywood's never exactly the right size. And I'm going to try to put this one, slide this one right up in there. Beautiful. And then let's see if I can get these two on. The other thing I want to think about is the direction the plywood's going. So the grain is usually left to right. And I think these might actually look better if, yeah, I'm going to flip these. So up here is a rotate tool. So I'm going to rotate this one that way and rotate this one that same way. Because I want the grain running down the sides. I think that's going to look much nicer than the way I had it. So I'm going to do that there. I'm just going to position stuff. I'm just trying to figure out something that works well, that doesn't use as much plywood. And these two I want to be sideways as well. I want the grain running across this and across the face that way. So yeah, I think that, what if I put that in there? And this feels wasteful. Hang on, let me play around a little bit. That feels a little bit better. And I want to keep a decent little gap between them as well. I don't want the laser re-burning the same spot over again. I think that's good. Like I'm going to live with that. Now, one thing we need to do, this is the tricky part. This one I actually glued on together upside down. I'm very frustrated myself. But you can see the piece of paper actually slides inside there. And it's like, well, how do you keep a gap in there for that? Well, what I did is I actually engraved a black square around the outside edge, except for the very last part of the edge. But around this whole inside edge, I engraved a black square, which means the plywood actually gets vaporized off, leaving a little gap there big enough for the paper to go through. So that piece, we won't actually do that work right here on this piece. We're going to draw black rectangles around these edges. And we don't have to worry about getting very close to them because this is a cut line. So as long as we get somewhat close, we're good. So let's do that now. Let's take a black square and let's say that's our top. So we're going to want to cut around the top. We're going to want a slot going all the way, almost all the way across. So what we're going to do is draw from about here, this top, we're going to draw a box that goes, to there-ish. We'll size this in just a second. So over here on stroke style, I actually don't want, so stroke paint, sorry. I don't want a stroke, but I do want a fill, and I want that fill to be black, just like that. I want the radius, so this RX and RY is how rounded over the corners are. I don't want a rounded over corner, I want them squared off. So I put those both at 0. And then the width here, we did it as a 0.6 centimeters, so 6 millimeter wide. Between this right here is 6 millimeters. So we want 3 millimeters of black here. So we're going to change that 3.024 to 3. And this whole thing is 8 minus 0.3. Well, that can't be right. Let's just change it to 60 for now. We'll figure out what it's supposed to be in a second. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, that looks good. Notice how we're not exactly on it. I'm going to just move it over just a hair. It doesn't really matter because this is going to be a cut line anyway. So like there-ish. I want to stay away from the center of that red line though. I'm going to be on the outside edge of it whenever I can. And now I'm just going to go ahead and make another one, and I'm going to do it like here-ish. And then we'll put these together, and I'll do another one here-ish. We'll figure them out in just a second, how big to make each one of them. And then this one was pretty good, so I'm going to draw it from here to here. Yeah, like there-ish. Good. And now I'm going to click on this other tool here, this editing tool, and I'm going to zoom in and just start lining some stuff up. So this one I know I want to be 0.3. So my width says 0.347, so I'm going to say 0.3 here. And I'm going to turn the lock tool off. And what that's going to allow me to do is as I change the length of one side, it won't make it wider as well. It'll just change that one side at a time. And I'm just going to zoom in here a little bit, and then I'm going to take this one, drag it down to there, drag it all over like that, and then drag this one out to the edge there. Pretty good so far. This one goes out to here. Oh, actually, this one's the wrong size probably. Let's see, this one we want the height 0.267, so we want this to be a 0.3 or 3 millimeters. Okay, that one's good. That's good. I don't really care what it looks like too much. I just want to get things pretty close because this is going to be underneath. It's going to be on the back side of that front face where the paper is going to slide through. So this is the top part. You can see I made the whole thing black here because that's going to all get zapped away so the paper can slide directly under this. The edges will stay under this black part and then slide right underneath there. So that is that. That should be good. That's good. Ready to rock and roll. I guess we could do some decoration here, do like a KHS on here. That sounds like fun. We have a minute or two left, so let's do a quick, just a KHS. And that looks pretty decent. And I'm just going to click off of that, Control C for copy, Control V for paste. That's like V is in victory. I'm going to highlight both of these and come over here and tip them. And then I'm going to put one like here-ish and another one like here-ish. That looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. And then that's it. All done. So I'm going to hit File, Save. And I'm going to save this as... and it's always hard to figure out where this is. So this PC, Windows, I think Windows is where I'm going. Yeah, users, hopefully this isn't hard like this for you guys, but I don't know. OneDrive, and then engineering, and then Fusion 360, and then I'm going to put it in signs. Computer signs, and this is where I like to put them in what's called cut lines. And here I say computer sign final, and I like to put the number of pages, page 1 of 1. That way I know that it's only one of them and there's not 2 or 3 of them. And if there is 2 or 3 of them, I know there's 2 or 3 of them because each one says like 1 of 3, 2 of 3, 3 of 3. All right. That's it. Ready for the laser now. So hit File, Save. Once you save this as a computer sign, go ahead and close it out, put it on a flash drive, take it over the laser, and burn it. Let's see how it goes.